Before we begin, it is important to acknowledge the difficult nature of the story we are about to explore. The case of Anita Cobby is one of profound sadness and brutality. It involves details that are graphic and may be disturbing for many people. Our goal is to tell her story with the utmost respect and empathy, focusing on the human life that was tragically cut short. This account is intended for educational purposes, to understand the events that transpired and their lasting impact. All the information presented today has been gathered from publicly available sources on the internet, including news articles, documentaries, and official records. On the night of February 2nd, 1986, a bright and beloved young woman named Anita Cobby was walking home in a quiet Sydney suburb. She was a nurse, a former daughter, and a friend to many. Her journey home was one she had made countless times before, a simple walk through familiar streets. But on this particular night, something went terribly wrong. Anita never made it home. This single event would unleash a wave of shock, fear, and grief that would ripple across Australia, forever changing the nation's perception of safety and innocence. Anita Lorraine Lynch was born on November 2nd, 1959. She was a welcome addition to the family. Gary Lynch, Grace Lynch. She grew up in the peaceful, leafy suburb of Glenbrook in the lower Blue Mountains, west of Sydney. A place where neighbours knew each other. Children played freely in the streets. The Lynch family were close-knit and loving, providing a stable, nurturing home for Anita and her younger sister Catherine. Gary, a hard-working man. Grace, a devoted mother. They taught their daughters kindness, they taught compassion, and the importance of family. From a very young age, Anita was known for her bright, bubbly personality, a trait that would define her life. Her childhood was idyllic, simple pleasures and strong family bonds. She attended Glenbrook Public School, a popular, well-liked student, academically bright, socially gifted, warm and open. The small Glenbrook community respected the Lynches. Anita's early years were shaped by community and security. She joined local activities, school plays, brownies, always with a smile. After graduating from Nepean High School in 1977, Anita knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. Her innate desire to care for others led her directly to a career in nursing. This was not just a job for her, it was a calling. She enrolled at the Sydney Hospital Nursing School, embarking on a demanding but rewarding journey. The training was rigorous, long hours, intense study, emotional resilience to deal with sickness and suffering on a daily basis. Anita thrived in this environment. She was a natural caregiver, combining clinical skills with deep-seated empathy. Her patients adored her. Her colleagues respected her for her professionalism and positive attitude. While Anita was dedicated to her nursing career, her life was not solely defined by her work. Her striking looks, her natural poise, her charm. This led her to the world of beauty pageants. In 1979, she entered Miss Western Suburbs, encouraged by friends and family. She won the title. The win showed more than physical beauty. Her radiant personality captivated the judges. Winning Miss Western Suburbs qualified her for Miss Australia. She became a finalist at the national pageant. People remembered her as refreshingly down-to-earth. They remembered her as kind to fellow contestants. In a competitive field, she was a unifying presence. In 1984, Anita met John Cobby, both trainee nurses. He was steady, kind, quietly funny. Conversation came easy. Early dates, coffee, beach walks, dancing, shared hopes sketched on napkins. They married simply, surrounded by family. Joy felt practical and bright. Work was relentless. Opposing rosters pulled them apart. Anita, we keep missing each other. John, we'll fix it. They tried. Notes on the fridge, swapped shifts, counselling that brought honesty. The love stayed, the timing didn't. With care, they chose a respectful separation, promising kindness. Anita leaned on family and friends, turning toward healing. After the decision, they moved carefully, boxes labelled, memories wrapped in paper. John, call if you need anything. Anita, I will, thank you, for everything we were. There was no scandal here, only two good people choosing kindness. Work steadied her. On wards and in quiet corridors, she found purpose. Friends gathered her close, simple dinners, shared laughter returning in small waves. Anita, I'm okay, one day at a time. A friend, we're here, always. She set routines, morning jogs, family visits, early nights when the roster allowed. A framed photo on the shelf reminded her of home. In her diary, small check marks: run, call mum, lights out before 10. Weeks later came a normal Sunday. Her shift ended on February 2nd. Quiet goodbyes, a tired smile. Plans were modest. Dinner with colleagues, nothing out of the ordinary. It was a normal Sunday evening, and as evening folded over Sydney, she began the familiar journey home to Blacktown. 26 in her prime, anchored by work, loved by family, surrounded by friends. After her shift at Sydney Hospital, Anita had dinner with friends, then caught the westbound train from Central. Just after 10, she arrived at Blacktown Station and began the familiar walk home. Sodium streetlights pooled amber on the quiet, almost empty footpath. Near Prospect Street, headlights appeared behind her, slow and deliberate. The car eased alongside. A rear door cracked open. Within seconds, men spilled out. A hand clamped over her mouth as she was dragged toward the open door. Forced into the rear seat, a voice said, "Keep quiet." The door slammed. Tires chirped. Inside, she tried to twist free, but a belt was looped tightly around her wrists. A hand pressed her head down, a brutal threat silencing any scream. The city glow fell behind them as houses thinned and the road ran darker. They were heading toward Prospect, restrained, threatened, and utterly trapped. What followed would be pieced together from evidence and later confessions. For now, the car slipped into the dark and the street fell silent behind it. The agonizing wait for news did not last long. On the afternoon of Tuesday, February 4th, 2 days after Anita was last seen, a farmer named John Reen was checking on his cattle. He was driving his tractor across a paddock on his property in Prospect, a rural area not far from Blacktown. As he drove past a barbed wire fence, he noticed something unusual lying in the grass. Curious and slightly unnerved, he stopped his tractor and walked closer to investigate. The moment he realized what he was looking at would haunt him for the rest of his life. Lying in the field was the body of a young woman. Law enforcement officers and forensic specialists descended upon the quiet paddock, sealing it off as a major crime scene. The search for the missing nurse, Anita Cobby, had come to the most devastating possible conclusion. The hope that she would be found alive was extinguished in an instant. The body found in the Prospect paddock was their beloved daughter, Anita. With the discovery of Anita's body, the New South Wales Police Force launched one of the largest and most intensive investigations in Australian history. Task Force Gold was established, bringing together a team of the state's most experienced detectives. The public was in shock, and the pressure to find the killer or killers was immense. The lead investigator, Detective Chief Inspector Graham Rosetta, and his team faced a daunting task. The crime scene in the paddock offered few initial clues. The detectives began by painstakingly piecing together Anita's last known movements. Forensic experts worked tirelessly, examining Anita's body for any trace evidence that might lead them to her attackers. Every tiny piece of potential evidence was collected, bagged, and sent to the lab for analysis. They appealed to the public for help. The plea was broadcast on television, and Anita's smiling face was plastered across the front pages of newspapers. The hunt was on, a methodical and determined effort to find the men who had committed this terrible crime and bring them to justice. The first significant crack came from an unlikely source. A psychiatric nurse, Valerie, contacted police. She had a patient with a minor self-inflicted wrist wound. The man seemed troubled and began talking about a murder, providing details not publicly known. He said 5 men were involved. He gave a name, John Travers. He said Travers and his gang frequented the pubs, the streets, and the surrounding suburbs of Blacktown. Detectives immediately began investigating Travers, a 19-year-old with petty crime history. They put him and his associates under surveillance. Police identified Travers's close circle: Michael Murdoch, Les Murphy, Michael Murphy, and Gary Murphy. The five fit the profile. They were troublemakers, drinking, committing petty thefts, joyriding in stolen cars. The surveillance operation was intense. Detectives covertly watched, listened via secret devices, and gathered evidence. The tip from the psychiatric nurse had given Task Force Gold its first real targets. The surveillance operation that followed was one of the most critical phases of the entire investigation. High-tech listening devices were secretly planted in their homes and cars. The goal was to let the men incriminate themselves, to hear the truth from their own mouths. The detectives listened for hours to mundane, drunken chatter. The men would talk about the nurse and the events of that night. One of the most crucial pieces of intercepted conversation came when one of the men's wives confronted her husband about his involvement. He admitted to being there, trying to downplay his role, but confirming the gang's culpability. On February 26 and 27, 1986, heavily armed police officers swooped in, coordinated raids across Western Sydney. Arrest of John Travers, Michael Murdoch, Les Murphy, Michael Murphy, Gary Murphy. The net had finally closed. The men responsible for a crime that had terrified a nation were now in custody. Once the five suspects were in custody, they were separated, taken to different police stations for interrogation. The detectives' strategy was to break them down individually, to exploit the weak links in their bond of silence. John Travers, the so-called ringleader, was the first to crack. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, including the recordings of his own incriminating words, what followed was a full, detailed, and chilling confession. He implicated all four of his accomplices, describing the specific role each man played, one by one. Their denials began to fall apart. Faced with Travers' betrayal and the mountain of evidence, Michael Murdoch also confessed. Leslie Joseph Murphy confessed. Michael James Murphy confessed. Only Gary Murphy, the youngest of the brothers, steadfastly maintained his innocence, refusing to admit to anything beyond being present in the car. On February 28, 1986, all five men were formally charged. John Raymond Travers, Michael Murdoch, Leslie Joseph Murphy, Michael James Murphy, Gary Stephen Murphy. They were charged with the abduction, the rape, and the murder of Anita Cobby. The media frenzy reached a new peak as the faces of the five accused men were splashed across every television screen and newspaper front page. The trial of the five men began on March 16, 1987, at the Supreme Court of New South Wales. It was one of the most high-profile and emotionally charged trials in Australian legal history. The public interest was so intense that the courtroom was packed every single day. Media members of the public, Anita's grieving family, who sat with quiet dignity through the harrowing proceedings. The Crown Prosecutor, Norman Nader, methodically laid out the case against the five accused. He presented the jury with the mountain of evidence collected by Task Force Gold: covert police recordings, detailed confessions, forensic findings that linked the men to the crime. The court heard the chilling details of Anita's final hours, recounted through the suspect's own recorded confessions. The jury listened to Travers's cold, detached description of the attack. It caused audible gasps in the courtroom. Medical experts took the stand to describe the horrific injuries Anita had sustained. For Anita's family, listening to this testimony was an exercise in unimaginable pain. Yet they remained present, determined to see justice done for their daughter. The defense attorneys for the five men faced an almost impossible task. The evidence against their clients was overwhelming. Their strategy largely involved trying to discredit the police investigation, suggesting the confessions were coerced. The trial lasted for 54 days, during which the nation was held captive by the unfolding courtroom drama. After weeks of harrowing testimony and legal arguments, the case was handed over to the jury. They deliberated for just 6 hours.
On June 10, 1987, the jury foreman stood and delivered the verdict.
One by one, each of the 5 men was found guilty on all charges: murder, aggravated rape, abduction. The sentencing took place on June 16, 1987. The presiding judge, Justice Alan Maxwell, was tasked with handing down the punishment.
He described the crime as one of the most horrifying physical and sexual assaults and a calculated and cold-blooded murder.
Before delivering his sentence, Justice Maxwell read a detailed 9-page summary of the crime to the court. Justice Maxwell then delivered his sentences.
Each of the 5 men was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder. Looking directly at the 5 men in the dock, he declared, "This sentence should be recorded as for the term of your natural life."
He said the files should be marked never to be released. His words were a powerful condemnation and a reflection of public outrage. The sentence was met with applause from the public gallery. It was a clear and unambiguous message: no redemption, no second chances. The 5 men who had stolen Anita Cobby's life would now forfeit their own, destined to spend the rest of their days behind prison walls. While the guilty verdicts and life sentences brought a sense of legal closure, they could do little to heal the profound grief of Anita Cobby's family. Her parents, Gary Lynch, Grace Lynch, and her sister Catherine, had endured the unimaginable. Gary and Grace Lynch emerged from their private tragedy to become powerful public advocates. They channeled their grief into a force for change. Appalled by a legal system that often seemed to prioritize criminals' rights over victims, they became outspoken critics of the parole system and vocal supporters of victims' rights. Public anger did not subside with sentencing. The case exposed deep-seated frustration with the justice system. Justice Maxwell's never-to-be-released recommendation was widely praised, but it sparked a broader debate about sentencing and parole for violent offenders. The crime hardened public attitudes and created demand for tougher laws and harsher punishments, a sentiment that would influence political and legal discourse for years to come. For Western Sydney, the scars ran deep. The murder of Anita Cobby left an indelible mark on the region's psyche. It stole a sense of innocence and security that was never fully recovered. Memorials were established, and her name became a symbol of tragic loss and community resilience. The murder of Anita Cobby was a watershed moment in Australian history. The most immediate legacy was the creation of the Homicide Victims Support Group in New South Wales. Co-founded by Anita's parents, the group provided a crucial network of support for families navigating the trauma of losing a loved one to violence. The case also had a profound impact on the legal and penal systems. The public outrage and the powerful advocacy of the Lynch family put immense pressure on politicians to toughen sentencing laws. Justice Maxwell's never-to-be-released declaration set a new benchmark for sentencing in the most heinous crimes. The notion that some criminals were beyond redemption and should be permanently removed from society gained significant traction in the public consciousness, influencing legislation and judicial attitudes for decades to come. The 5 men convicted of her murder remain in prison, fulfilling the judge's recommendation. John Travers, the ringleader, died in custody in 2008. Michael Murdoch, Les Murphy, Michael Murphy, Gary Murphy. They have become Australia's most notorious prisoners, their names forever linked to one of the country's most infamous crimes. More than 3 decades later, the story of Anita Cobby continues to resonate. It serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the existence of random, senseless evil, but also of enduring love. The legacy of Anita Cobby is not solely defined by the horror of her death, but also by the positive changes her tragic loss inspired. By fighting for the rights of other victims, they transformed their personal pain into a powerful force for good, ensuring that Anita's bright, kind and promising life would, in the end, not be in vain. While the details of the crime and its aftermath are what often dominate the narrative, it is crucial that we remember Anita Cobby for the life she lived, not just the way she died. She was more than a headline or a case study. She was a daughter who brought immense joy to her parents, a sister who was a role model, a friend, a nurse whose compassion touched the lives of countless patients. Her friends remember her infectious laugh and her unwavering kindness. She was a woman of substance and grace. It is this vibrant life, so full of promise, that was stolen. This account has been compiled for educational purposes. All information presented has been gathered from publicly available sources. In discussing true crime, especially cases involving such extreme violence, it is essential to approach the subject with compassion and respect for the victim and their loved ones. If you or someone you know has been affected by violent crime, please know that there are resources available to help. In closing, we remember Anita Cobby. We remember her bright spirit and the positive impact she had on so many during her short 26 years. Her legacy is not one of fear, but one of love, strength, and positive change. By telling her story, we ensure that she is not forgotten. May her memory continue to inspire kindness, and may she rest in peace.